Professor, to begin at the beginning, describe your parents to me.
Okay, so my father was a pediatrician. He still is actually almost retired. He was born in Shanghai. My mother was a high school maths teacher. She was born in Hong Kong. They moved to Australia in 1970, and I was born a few years afterwards.
Why did they move to Australia?
I think Australia had a shortage of medical professionals, and there was some special visa program, I think, for which my dad took advantage of.
What is your birth order? Where are you in the...
I'm the oldest of three.
Okay.
I have two younger brothers.
So all boys?
All boys, yes.
Okay. All mathematicians?
Well, my younger two brothers, they do have PhDs in mathematics, but one of them works at Google right now, and the other works as a researcher for the Australian Defence Force Agency.
So two in America, maybe, and one, or
no? One lives in Adelaide, one lives in Sydney. They both live in Australia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's look at the young prodigy. I mean, it's a boring word, but you were called that almost from the first. What were the early signs of what would become your intellectual life?
Well, of course,
you weren't.
I mean, so
yes.
this is actually secondhand because
yes,
I don't remember at the time. But yeah, so my parents told me that when I was two, I was at a party with some friends, and they found me teaching some slightly older kids, 5 and 6, how to count using these number blocks, and they hadn't taught me this, and I had apparently picked it up from watching Sesame Street.
Yes.
So I don't remember that.
Yes, of course.
The earliest memory I have like that was when I was a bit older, maybe 4 or 5, and my grandmother was washing windows at my home, and I was telling her to put the detergent on the windows in the shape of numbers. So I always liked numbers and patterns,
and you actually remember that. This is not told to you by your grandmother. You remember.
Yes, although. I think I also remembering it and so forth. Yeah, so
right.
The memory changes a little bit because of that. But yeah.
So there's an affection, to say the least, for numbers. Other intellectual curiosity that has been described in you, or is it pretty much focused in this way?
Yeah, well, I did all kinds of very nerdy things when I was a kid. I loved these fantasy novels where, the ones where there's a big map of this imaginary world. And
yes.
I like making my own maps. I would go in the backyard with chalk and draw out these huge maps, which would then get washed away by the rain. Okay, but
yes.
Yeah.
Would you say you lived in a world of your own? I mean, that's a melodramatic way to put it, but did you have friends?
I had a couple of close friends. Yeah, I was often not in my class because I was accelerated several years. Although my parents had managed to negotiate a very complicated arrangement with the headmasters of my principals of my school, where I would at least take some classes near my own like physical education, for instance,
right,
and try to get math and physics classes several years above. It led to a very complicated schedule. My mother, in particular, would always be picking me up from primary school to drop me off at high school, or to pick up high school to drop me off at the local university.
In a way, you were a problem for a nice problem, but you weren't just going to be able to progress in the normal way. You weren't going to be able to just go to the local school. So there must have been a sense, it must have been when you were 4 to 6 or something like that, that they needed to direct your education more or figure you the best path for you.
Right, yeah, so there wasn't as much infrastructure for these things as there is now. When I was 2 or 3, they tried putting me actually in a very fancy private school, and it lasted like a week. I was not ready for it. I think they talked to some psychologists and various gifted education experts, and they eventually settled on what I just said, to have as much of my class time with people roughly my own age as possible, but to have some classes at higher level. In some ways, maybe it was because there wasn't as much experience with these things. So the principal and headmaster did have a certain amount of flexibility to try various things. I don't know if my particular education path could be replicated now. Actually, there may be more rules, but maybe there's also more options, more systematic resources.
I'm going to ask an odd question, but it's appropriate for this stage of your life, looking back. Were there things left out of your education? I mean, we'll get to the actual mathematical progression, but What,
Yeah,
were there
well-
losses as well as gains in the childhood?
Yeah, well, so some things sort of happened in weird order. So, I mean, so my primary in high school, I graduated from high school at, what, 12 or 13. So I didn't have my normal teenage sort of social life
Right.
during high school. But when I went to, actually when I went to Princeton when I was 16, that's when I started, going to clubs, like movie clubs and gaming clubs and so forth, and finding friends my own age. I was a graduate student by then, but I was undergraduate, my own age, and yeah.
Those might have been social disadvantages, but also intellectual disadvantages. Were you given history courses? Were you given art history? Were you?
I liked history actually. Yeah, English was definitely not my strongest subject as a kid. I would interpret things way too literally. I did not really understand sort of. So I mean, what I liked about mathematics and things like that was it was very precise. Like there was a
Yes.
right answer and a wrong answer, and I was not good with anything subjective. I did sit in on a few classes when I came here as a professor. I actually, I sat in on a history of Bach class, and I enjoyed it. So I did take one or two of these things for fun.
But your natural inclination was not to go into, let's call it the vague, but that's not a good description for the humanities. But
Yeah, I
the
would-
subjective.
Yeah, I guess I just said I didn't understand it. Like what was So with mathematics, I sort of understood the goal. Like this is what you should do and how you should. And I didn't pick up a long time. Like what was the purpose of say
Of literature.
I'll say literary criticism or creative writing.
You think you know that now?
Um,
You don't have to answer that.
Well, okay. I mean, I do realize now that my job, is mostly scientific, but
Of course.
there is when I give talks, I have to present the facts, but also have to present a narrative.
Yes.
And
That's essentially what literature is about.
yes, yeah. And so I can appreciate these things. Once you're an adult, I think it says you can pick up these things a lot.
You said something in one of the articles I read, not so long ago really, that as you look back, you don't think you got what math really was as a kid. Can you explain that?
Right. Yeah. So as I said, I like numbers and symbols, but to me it was like a game. You push symbols around and you get an answer. I also like computer games and logic puzzles, and they didn't have Sudoku back then, but they had things like that. Yeah. So it was only while I was in high school, I spent some weekends with a retired professor, and he would tell me his experiences as a mathematician during the war. And he would solve ballistic problems or logistics problems, and it was the first time I realized that mathematics was actually good for many things. When people would ask me what I would do as when I grew up, I had no idea. I think I a couple of times I thought maybe a shopkeeper, because I thought at least I can balance the books but I didn't really know. And actually, I was unaware that that you could have a job as a professional mathematician, where you would work on problems which are fundamental research. They're not tied to an immediate application.
This is interesting because, of course, for many reasons, but also the whole notion, again, of parental guidance in this period. I have a sense that they weren't necessarily force-feeding you or sending you vocationally in a direction. They were just enabling your curiosity. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. So I mean, early on, we tried. I mean, they tried all kinds of things. I remember. I took a lot of piano lessons when I was young, but at some point I rebelled. I didn't. I started crying every time they were taught to practice, and they eventually stopped. And I regret that because my son plays piano better than I do now.
Right.
Also, so do my brothers. Actually, that bugs me more. But looking back, I would have continued more
But they're not saying you're going to be a scholar, you're going to go to a university, you're going to do this, that, and the other.
Yeah. Well, they tried to encourage me to do various things.
Yes.
I remember at one point they were thinking maybe I should go into the physical sciences rather than mathematics because I thought it was more practical.
Ah.
Yeah, but
But there wasn't really a push.
I think once they saw that I was, what I was best at and what I was comfortable with, I think they found a good path for me. Yeah.
Another thing that comes across reading about the young professor was the fact that you weren't best described as studious.
Oh no, no, that is certainly the case. Yeah, so I was very quick, and I could retain a lot of facts in my head for short periods of time. And so, I remember my note-taking skills were quite terrible. If something was interesting, then I would not only take down what was written, but sort of make my own variations of it. But if something was boring, I would write almost nothing. And then, maybe a week before the finals, I would study my notes.
You'd cram.
I would cram, and I would pass my tests. Although my grades steadily declined over time.
Really, at what level? I mean, where were they in decline?
So let's see. So when I finished high school, I was the top 5%.
Yes.
It's not. They don't have the ABC letter grades in Australia. In fact, I've forgotten now what the system is. But I remember as an undergraduate, like every year, my grades would basically, I guess in US terms, drop from A to B to C.
Yes.
I failed 2 classes in my last year.
No.
Yeah. It was one was a programming, because I was stubborn actually. So one was an introduction to Fortran class, I believe, and I just refused to learn Fortran. I learned another computer language called BASIC, and I felt like I could do that. I remember I had assignments that were to program something, to do something in Fortran, and I would turn in assignments in BASIC. So I failed that class. Apparently, the two professors that failed me, they bragged about it. Okay, later. Okay, in the common room, they're the only ones who failed me. The other one was Introduction to Quantum Mechanics, where half of the course was doing all these calculations and so forth. But we were warned well in advance that as part of the final there would be an essay component. You have to talk about the history of quantum mechanics and the effect on how it changed physics. And this I also refused to do. I just did not study for it all. And then when the time came, of course, this 50-point question, and I had nothing to say. I remember crying, and the proctor had to escort me out of the room.
You learned your lesson? So to speak?
Not then. I mean, I still passed. Yeah, I think my real wake-up call actually was a bit later. As a graduate student, actually, in Princeton, the system is that after about 2 or 3 years, you take these qualifying exams, which are these oral exams with 3 professors, and they ask you questions in your chosen field. And if you ask them if you answer them easily, then the question's harder. If you struggle, you make the questions simpler. And so again, I use my usual studying method to practice with. So most of the students, they were very stressed out. They practiced for months. They gave mock exams to each other. Yeah, I think I just did 2 or 3 weeks of study. And the subject, which is my main subject of study, originally, which is called harmonic analysis. So that I studied the least because I thought that was what I was best at. And when the time came, I could not answer basic questions in the subject. So I struggled, and they asked me easier questions, and I struggled with those, and it was quite embarrassing. The only thing that saved me was that there was another topic which I had to select, number theory, which at the time I was not as strong in. And so that one I actually was concerned about, and that one I practiced quite.
You have?
Yeah. And the professor who was brought in to examine me on that topic had actually had a misunderstanding. He thought I was actually to select a different area of mathematics as my topic, and so he had prepared a completely inappropriate set of questions. And so he only lobbed me very standard softball questions, which I could very easily answer off. So I lucked out of passing my qualifying exams, but it was quite close apparently.
And it registered on you what had happened.
Well, my advisor, who was on the committee, had us talk to me afterwards and said that he was disappointed. My letters of recommendation were strong, and this wasn't what I was expecting. He was very kind and gentle about it, but it was a real shock. I think it was the first time I really saw that there was sort of real consequences to sort of not studying. Yeah.
Now, we always have to register the fact that when you're speaking of yourself in graduate school, whatever, we're speaking of still a very young person.
Yeah, I guess I was about 18 or something at the time. Yeah.
Yes. So a lot of these issues are the natural issues of growing up.
I guess so. Yeah, although I mean, I know some 18-year-olds who are extremely mature. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of variance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's again just register the sequence of your education. So you left high school at what age?
About 12 or 13.
12 or 13. You then went to Flinders?
Yes.
Locally, which is in Melbourne.
In Adelaide, actually.
In Adelaide, of course.
Yeah. Although it's a bit complicated because during my last years of high school, I did take some classes at Flinders.
Bridge classes.
Right, and they counted it for credit, actually. So when I formally did enroll, I actually finished my undergraduate degree in 2 years. But that's an illusion. I mean, I spent 2 previous years.
Right.
taking some
What was
time.
your thesis as an undergraduate? Did you have a thesis?
I did a
as
master's
topic?
thesis,
Yes.
yes, with on harmonic analysis.
How are you determining from the child who liked numbers to the development of an understanding that there's a field to the interest in particular aspects of the field?
Well, at that stage, I mostly there was a professor at Flinders who decided to advise me, and at that point, I was better at analysis than other areas of mathematics, and so he took, and that was his area too. So it worked out well. I mostly just did what my professors and teachers just suggested me to do. So for example, when I finished my undergraduate, I didn't really know what to do, but when my advisor strongly suggested that I apply abroad, which I wasn't planning to do myself, but so we applied to Europe and England and the US, and eventually got into Princeton.
Again, I suppose through your advisors, are you getting a sense of the competencies in various departments? Because the decision for graduate work is the first really serious professional decision. It's going to shape a lot of your intellectual life. So what was it in the end that drew you to Princeton as opposed to some other places?
Okay, I had heard of it. Okay, but mostly because my advisors recommended that this was a good place to go. I don't remember now where else I was accepted. There weren't that many places, actually.
There weren't that many places that you applied, or not that many places that you were accepted?
Actually, my parents did most of the application process. I don't remember now. Okay.
So actually, stubborn though you are by nature at this point, you're willing to be directed in terms of the shape of your career.
Right, yeah, I guess these things didn't, the things I didn't care about, I think I didn't think that hard about where I should be in some way.
Okay.
I was never really ambitious in that respect. I think I don't like being told what to do if it involves something that I want to do a different way. At least, I hope I'm not quite as stubborn these days, but...
Who was going to be your mentor, or turned out to be your mentor at Princeton?
So I ended up working with Professor Eli Stein, who was a world expert in harmonic analysis, which was the field that I started in. So he was an amazing. So he's so legendary. He's had like 50, 60 graduate students, which is much higher than most other people, and he's very effective at it. And he would meet all of us regularly. Often I remember when meeting him, there'd often be a queue outside his door. He'd meet each of us for half an hour, and then and then you just wait for the next person in. Yeah.
I'm going to now ask a very general question for lay people, which is, as one looks within the field, but at the field of mathematics, and begins to become interested in this direction rather than that, through guidance and personal interest, is it really the nature of the problems to be solved that attracts you to a direction or the other, or a sense of the history of the field and what some of the major issues have been? How does one think within that?
It's a mix of everything. You often go as a graduate student thinking I'm going to do X and Y because I learned about some topic as an undergraduate and I thought it was exciting. but you may not be aware of the current area of research. So there were some areas of mathematics that I thought I would be working on going to Princeton, and I came to Princeton, took some classes, and I found either that they were too challenging for me, that they required more background than I was ready for, or the questions which I thought were interesting were all solved like 50, 60 years ago. They're still working on other questions, but those didn't interest me as much. I mean, and your advisors tend to guide you towards research that is fairly current, that ties into to very active areas that other people are working on right now. I mean, for the purposes of your career, it's much better to work in an active area, so that there's many places who would be interested in hiring someone with your specialty than in an obscure area that no one cares about, even if you like it a lot. I mean, so there's a few. I mean, one nice thing about mathematics is that there's room. It needs a lot of diversity. So we have a lot of mainstream mathematicians who focus on sort of mainstream core areas of mathematics, following, refining existing techniques, and this is very important. But we have a small minority of more idiosyncratic mathematicians who try things that very few people are looking at. And they don't succeed as often but when they do, it can be quite valuable.
And they can almost open a field.
Yes, yeah. No, we've had several examples of that. There was recently a mathematician who actually almost dropped out of academia. That he couldn't get a regular teaching job. And he ended up at one point he was making sandwiches for Subway, and he solved a major problem in number theory. Now he has a tenure job again. We get all sorts.
You said something that's slipped by that I want to return to. You actually said that certain things you found too challenging. Now, very few people would expect that you find anything challenging at that level, that you would drop it in mathematics. But
my knowledge of research level mathematics is not so much about sort of raw intellect or memory or speed. I mean, those are helpful, but it's a lot of it is just knowledge, knowing the history, knowing what else is true, and there's a lot of what's called folklore, like little tips and tricks, rules of thumb that are not in textbooks. You only pick up by listening to the right people, talking to the right people, or working on these problems, and because I didn't pay attention to a lot of the classes, I didn't think I would care about it. I had a fairly narrow knowledge base initially. In fact, I think I've learned more mathematics after my PhD than before my PhD. So I've worked with a lot of collaborators in other fields, and through them I've been exposed to many other areas of mathematics.
You've hit on something that is often remarked about you, which is that you're very collaborative. Usually said in a celebratory sense. People admire that in you. Can you, again, for a layman, describe the various choices literally about isolation and intellectual endeavor in mathematics, and the notion of collaboration and how it works?
So I think the nature of mathematics has changed over the years. So if you go back, say, 50 years ago, almost all, I would say the majority of say, research papers were single-authored people.
Yes.
There was sort of this archetype of a lone mathematician working in an ivory tower, scribbling away in his attic and not talking to anybody else, and eventually solving a problem. And if you go back 100, 200 years, people were very competitive about it. Mathematicians would challenge each other, almost like duels.
Yes.
Can you solve this problem? And they will not reveal their answer until they'd seen. But it's over time it's changed for the better. I have to say. The nature of the problems has changed a lot. It used to be that you could specialize in one very tiny area of mathematics, be the world expert on that, and not know much about anything else, and you could do good work. But many problems now, they connect different areas of mathematics together, or they connect mathematics to physics, computer science, biology, finance, whatever. And you need so much expertise. There's no one person who could do it all. Also, I think people found that collaboration is just more fun. And I certainly, the most enjoyable projects I've had are the joint ones. And also collaboration is easier now, with the internet and whatever. It used to be you had to be physically in the same location as your collaborator to make much progress, or you have to write these very long letters by hand, or make these long phone calls. But now it's so easy to collaborate.
If you were a specialist in musical comedy, I would understand collaboration. There's the lyricist, there's the composer, there's the one who writes the book, and so forth. Collaboration in mathematics, is it tossing problems at each other that you collectively defined and then having a conversation about that? What is collaboration?
Well, it's lots of talking usually. There is a problem which you can both see requires some knowledge from subfield X, which you have, and some knowledge in subfield Y, which your collaborator has, and so there's a natural opportunity here, and you talk, and one of you suggests something. Often what happens is that the problem naturally splits into parts, and everyone sort of grabs one part and says, okay, I will do this step, and you do this step. And then often there's this negotiation, because there are ways to make your step easier for yourself at the expense of making the other step harder.
Yes.
And then so you have to sort of bargain with, that I can't do this, but I can do this weaker thing. Will that be enough for your step? No, I really need this harder thing. But often the other thing is that somehow when you're talking and explaining mathematics to other people, it engages more of your brain than if you're just sitting quietly and thinking. At least for me, somehow ideas come more easily. I feel when there's an audience and
yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes that must come as a teacher with students as well.
Yes, yeah. So my style in teaching is I do improvise a lot. I prepare my notes, and then I often go on tangents, which I wouldn't have thought about if I had just going off. If I was just preparing by myself. But and the students don't even. I mean, it helps a lot if they ask questions. But sometimes just the mere fact of having an audience, somehow it can inspire you. Maybe it's true in the performing arts as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A word that occurs to me as I speak to any number of people who have achieved in both mathematics and computer science is just the nature of their curiosity. Mm-hmm. It seems that is often what directs things, not because a corporation has said, make this happen, not because even a university has said, we want to do this, but curiosity roams. Is that?
Right, yeah. So it's pure research. So there are big problems which everyone would love to solve, and they will have many applications, but they're difficult. So then you start looking for similar problems which look like the big problems, but which are easier. And then you can look for sub-problems, or you can look for problems which, if you could solve that, you might develop a tool which and so some of the once you find one thing interesting, you'll find other related things interesting, and sometimes what happens is that there's a breakthrough. That's somebody solves a problem by introducing a new method. He or she introduces a new tool that no one had done before, and everyone is very excited because now their favorite problem, which had been intractable, maybe now they have the right tool to crack it open, and so you get interested in what they do, and so it's it took a while. It takes a while to get used to this style of curiosity-driven research. Like kind of as a and your school education system, it's usually very authority based. A teacher or something gives you an assignment. You have homework, you have an exam, and not much time is spent on why you want to solve for X or whatever. Okay?
Yes.
But that's something you pick up later. Again, it's narrative actually. Somehow we only give you the narrative later. The analogy I'll give sometimes is that doing mathematics is like jumping in and watching a TV show 1,000 episodes in. And initially you don't know who the main characters are, who's the good guys, who's the bad guys, what the overarching plots are. But over time you pick it up.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Part of the lore again about you, is that people vie to intrigue you with their problems.
Yeah.
Do you find that happening?
Someone said that, and then once that hit the media, I got a lot more unsolicited problems than I know what to do with. I do get a lot of that. I mean,
and your response is to be interested or not to be interested, essentially.
Yeah, so I now have the standard disclaimer on my webpage that if you just send me some unsolicited paper, I would likely ignore it. But I do enjoy talking to colleagues. So I go to conferences and I talk to people. Sometimes people visit here. I talk. Sometimes I can be helpful.
Also, one of the mysteries is too strong a word. One of the things that intrigue so many people about you, colleagues, of course, is the amount of your productivity, and which is often perceived as not inhuman, but beyond normal range of energy. How do you get so much done?
It doesn't feel like I feel like I always have much more to do than I actually do in any given day.
Are you quite orderly in the way you organize your days?
I do. I have a calendar and I think about how to schedule things. I think just one thing is that I try to match my what I do with sort of my energy level and my like if I'm really tired, I shouldn't be doing math. I should be doing errands or eating or something. Yeah, or if there's one thing is I found from the internet this tip. There's something called structured procrastination. If there's a task that you don't want to do, find another task that you don't want to do even more, and then you say and then just justify not doing that by doing the first thing. And so you can sort of play games with your mind. I'm also fond of doing things which have an upfront time investment, but will save me time over the long run. Nowadays when I teach a class, I write lecture notes for it, and I put them online on my blog. This does several things. So it forces me to actually prepare the material properly. It makes preparation for the classes very easy, and then if I teach the class again, it's a lot less effort. Also, in subsequent years, if someone else is interested in that area, I can just direct them to my notes and so forth.
You're bringing up, that makes me ask a very broad question about communication vehicles for intellectual endeavor, mathematics, of course, in your case. First of all, I'm very struck by the fact that mathematicians seem to still use blackboards in the age of computers. That's one form. So let's talk about that a bit.
Yeah, so we would switch, I think. Well, not everyone uses, first of all, not everyone uses blackboards, but a blackboard is extra memory space. If you have a complicated calculation, you can't keep it all in your head, so you put certain things down.
The next question is also within the range of communication, and that is the phenomenon, of course, classically of the article, and increasingly of the blog, as a form of communication of interest and meaning. Can you describe your choice of the blog? I mean, you write articles too, but your choice of the blog as a communication. Right.
So it's sort of, for me, it sort of happened sort of by accident. So I had a web page for many years. I set one up, I think, back in '96, '97, and I put up. So I started uploading my papers on there and so forth. And I decided at some point to put up a what's new page. So like every time I would, so a log of the most recent additions to my webpage. So December 17th, 1998, I uploaded this paper. And so I just did that as a habit. And then at some point, I remember I had a math question, and I didn't know how to answer it, and I was updating this what's new page, and so I decided, what the heck, I'll just put this here. Here's an open question that I'm not able to solve. And within like 3 days, I got an email saying, this question has been studied by so and so. Look at this paper. I think it solved it. And so what I had not realized was that people were actually reading my what's new page, and also that they also had feedback. And then I realized that this is something that one could benefit from more systematically. Now, already by this time, there were already about half dozen people who were already starting to blog in mathematics. So I copied their example and I started a blog, and it just took off. I got a lot more feedback than I'd expected. Hundreds and hundreds of people, a day would come in.
This is an extension, really, of collaboration in the
Right.
world now facilitated through this medium.
Yeah. And it appealed to me. I think one thing I hate is I hate duplicated effort. I find that when I talk to my graduate students, I teach them the tools of the trade and various tricks which are not written down in this folklore I was talking about before. And then they would graduate, and the new graduates would come in, and I find myself teaching them the same tools of the trade. So I haven't already told you this? No. Okay. And so this started frustrating me. So if I could put all this in one location, like on my blog, and then just train all my students to go.
Just refer them to it.
And then So then in the long run, that saves me time.
Back to your professional, I don't mean progress, but development. We're sitting at UCLA, which has become quite an important place for you to be in your career. What gets you to UCLA? What are the opportunities available here?
Well, it's a nice big department, very friendly. The administration is very supportive of mathematics in general. We get good graduate students. There's a lot of activity. There's a Math Institute just down the road. And in fact, there's so much conferences and seminars and stuff going on that you can't go to. You have to consciously pick and choose what to go to.
So that's about freedom. Is there a concentration of expertise here that works for you and your?
To some extent, I mean, we have very good people in pretty much every area, almost every area of mathematics. So there's certainly been times when I've had a math question, and the simplest thing to do is just go down the hall and knock on somebody's door. Although more and more now, actually, the internet is an even better resource. I think it's no longer as necessary as it used to be at a top-rate university to do top-rate mathematics.
That's very important to say.
Yeah, but still,
again, because of this medium of communication.
Actually, I've had sort of virtual graduate students who actually learn a lot of mathematics from reading my blog, I myself, I learn a lot from Wikipedia, and there's always other math sites actually very high quality.
So where you are is not as critical.
Not anymore. You need good internet access and a library and decent living conditions.
Do you find yourself participating, and maybe this is what communication makes unnecessary, in the region of people at Caltech, people?
No, we have a joint seminar, for example, in analysis with Caltech, and every other Friday we go down there, or they come up here, and we have dinner and so forth. And so, it's sort of part social, part mathematical.
I'm now going to ask something that's more challenging for me than for you, but maybe for you to explain it to somebody who's not a mathematician. And that is, I'd like to look at a few of your eureka moments with you, where in the attacking of a problem or a framework, something clicked that you're quite proud of it as a product.
Okay. So there was something I did 10, 15 years ago. There was a certain differential equation I was trying to solve. It's called the wave maps equation. So it models gravitational waves, but it doesn't matter exactly what it does. But it's what's called what's called nonlinear. And so it kept the solution kept oscillating too much, and I couldn't see sort of where it was going, and I needed some way to straighten it. It's like if you were trying to navigate, drive down a road, but somehow maybe you weren't seeing the road directly, but through a camera, and the camera was jittering, and so it was your view was very jittery, and it was very hard to steer in the right direction. So it was very hard to write down a solution to this problem, and I needed a way to somehow stabilize the solution. And I remember trying to construct a mental model of what I was trying to do. So I remember actually lying down on the floor, closing my eyes, and trying to roll around imagining that basically I was this wave evolving and trying to find the right sort of frame of reference to actually make the system reasonably stable, and and actually that was very helpful. I actually did find the right transformation and solve my problem. I remember I was at my aunt's place at the time in Melbourne, and she walked in on me, rolling around like this, and that's what I was doing, and I couldn't explain. So that's a rather extreme situation. So usually I use pen and paper.
Yes.
But occasionally you try to.
And in fact, the solution came to you.
Usually it's that's maybe my moment closest to sort of the stereotypical eureka type moment.
Right.
Most often it's anticlimactic. You work for months on the problem. You eliminate certain strategies as being impractical. You isolate the key difficulties. If I can solve this, I can probably solve the whole problem, but I have no idea how to solve this. You work on a special case and you say, oh, maybe I should be using this technique, but I can't see how to use this technique. So you keep failing to solve the problem, but every time you fail, you kind of see what the solution has to look like.
And you narrow the possibilities.
Right. And the pieces are getting closer and closer. And then at the end, it says, oh, what if I just connect? So, you realize that technique X is important, technique Y is important. And at some point, you just make some trivial observation, like, why not just do both at the same time? And then, because you've already spent months thinking about this problem and you understand everything else about the problem, once you make that last step, there's, everything clicks into place. It's, that's it. Okay, I think I've solved the problem. And they say, why didn't I think of that 2 weeks ago?
But you needed to do all of that to get there.
Right. You needed to really sort of internalize everything. So it's a funny process. There's a famous mathematician, Grothendieck, who likened it to opening a walnut. So there's some people who just try using a sledgehammer, and sometimes that works. But actually, often what you do, like his preferred way of solving problems is like he soaks it in. If you soak a walnut in water, eventually the shell becomes so soft that eventually it just falls apart.
Right. We spoke about communication, both, of course, electronically and with colleagues and so forth, but the framework in which I was initially thinking was within the world of mathematics. But one of the things that seemed to signal our own time is the cross-field discussions and categorization. Do you particularly find, have you done interactions with, I'm just going to say biologists, for example. It doesn't have to be the right answer, but across fields where you see disciplines going?
I've talked to biologists, astronomers, and so forth. I've not collaborated directly with them. I have worked with statisticians and electrical engineers. So there's one thing I've done which actually, so most of my work is basic research, has no immediate practical impact.
Right.
The one thing I did that actually has practical significance was something called compressed sensing. It's a new way to acquire data like images from very limited measurements. And it's a mathematical technique, and we found some mathematical explanation for why it works the way it does. And it's now used, for example, to speed up MRI imaging. So a scan which may have taken 3 minutes to acquire a good image, you can now take 10 seconds and still get a medically useful image out of it.
And that's a mathematically determined solution.
Yes, yeah. So it is. It was discovered by my colleagues who were working in statistics, and they had found a technique which, when they tried it on test data, worked a lot better than they had anticipated, but they couldn't explain completely why it was so effective. And so I worked with them to find sort of the right mathematical explanation for why this magic algorithm worked. And once we understood why it worked, you could see that it was actually very widely applicable. So actually, this technique had previously been discovered in seismology, actually, to discover the layers of rock and so forth. Again, a very limited number of seismic measurements. But there was a trick which people had discovered, and they said, well, this seems to work, we don't know why. But because they didn't have the right mathematical understanding of it, they had no idea that it was much more general than just seismology, that this technique could be applied. It's now used in astronomy. Very broadband wireless error correction, and so it has many applications which you wouldn't have seen unless you understood the mathematics behind it.
So you might be doing more of this in the future?
Well, that particular field has exploded, and when things get very crowded in the area, I tend to move away. I don't actually know what I'll be working on several years from now. I keep changing fields. It depends on what happens in mathematics, who I talk to.
Are there some long-standing mathematical problems that you have in the back burner to try to do your part to solve?
Yeah, well, there's a list of really impossible questions, and you should spend like 1 or 2 days a year, doing something ridiculous. There is a danger that it can consume you. And so there are unfortunately stories of mathematicians who've sort of gone off the rails a bit because there's a problem that obsessed them, and it's just not solvable by any current techniques. But for some reason they think they have a chance, and so it's good to try that for a day or two. But when you spend like every working moment for a year doing it, that
Right.
Although that being said, sometimes big problems have been solved by exactly that approach. There's a famous open problem called the Poincare conjecture, and it was solved by a very reclusive Russian mathematician who was working by himself on this problem for 7 years. People had lost track of what he was doing. Like, his name was Grigory Perelman. People had no idea what he was working on, and then suddenly he produced a completely correct proof of this conjecture.
There's a bit of a terminology that continues to intrigue me. Very often mathematicians use aesthetic terms to describe the world that they are trying to understand. This is a beautiful solution, this is an elegant problem, and so forth. Do you find yourself ever using that language, and if so, what do you mean by that?
I think elegance more often than beauty, but there is also beauty too. But when you find a trick, which something that turns a very complicated problem into a very simple problem.
So elegance is related to simplicity.
Right. I can give you one example actually.
Yes.
Okay, so I can give you the following game. So there's 2 players, and the numbers from 1 to 9, and I pick a number like 3, and then that's my number, and then you pick another number like 7, and then I pick 6, and so forth. And the objective is that you want to you win the game if you've picked 3 numbers that add up to 15. So if I manage to pick 1 and 5 and 9, and maybe some other numbers, the moment I pick 1, 5, and 9, I win. So I go first, and then you go, and so forth. And okay, so this is a game, and you can play it, and it's when I describe it like that, it's very hard to be good at this game. But this game is the same game as tic-tac-toe. That if you take the tic-tac-toe board and you number the numbers in the right way, 1 through 9, you can number them in such a way that getting a line is the same as getting 3 numbers that add up to 15.
Yes.
You have to use what's called a magic square. And once you see that, if you have in front of you a little square with those numbers on it, you can always win this game against an opponent who doesn't have this little graphical aid, because you can see the lines, and then you can use your geometric intuition and not just your arithmetic one. And so that's a trick which transforms a difficult problem into a much more tractable one.
Yes.
So that kind of trick is something which unexpectedly simplifies a problem that I find particularly
beautiful or elegant.
Yeah.
You're in mid-career, although your career started a lot earlier than some people, so maybe you're late middle career. I think you said that you don't know what you'll be working on in 2 years. Just as a word to those who might be watching this, are there broadly in mathematics areas that you see increasingly exciting that they might look into?
I think mathematics is becoming more quantitative and more random. in the past, people would be interested in just sort of very qualitative questions like, does this thing exist? Is this finite or infinite? Is it? But now, particularly since we're now more driven by applications, you want to know, so how finite, how infinite? There may be a result in mathematics that says that there is some solution to this equation, but now you want to know how big is it, how easy is it to find, and so forth. And pretty much every field of mathematics now has a quantitative component. It used to be analysis was sort of the only one, but then combinatorics and probability and algebra and geometry, and it's all become more quantitative, and also more random. So we used to work with very explicit sort of deterministic things, like quantities that you can write down by a single formula. But data in the real world, like if I want to know how the stock market is doing today, or where the next virus is going to come from, and so forth, you won't find a formula that predicts exactly, but you'll find statistics, that there's a certain 30% chance that this will happen. And so just more and more we have to do with random numbers, random shapes, random everything. So yeah, I think those are two general trends I see. And also math is becoming more and more interconnected, as we've already talked about. That.
Is there an easy way to talk about the difference between a choice in applied mathematics as opposed to theoretical or pure mathematics? How is that sort of decision made by a mathematician, or is applied mathematics now essentially computer science?
Well, there's a spectrum. So there's the pure mathematics, applied mathematics, and then computer science, engineering, and then industrial mathematics. And people move between the boundaries, and you collaborate with we all have a common language. We all speak mathematics with different accents, but so you don't have to declare. Or maybe formally you have to declare a major or something, but. You can. There are many good applied mathematicians who started out from a more pure background and vice versa.
It's a spectrum.
Yeah.
I think, if I'm right, there was a time when there was some condescension toward applied.
Yes.
As opposed to pure.
No, there was certainly sort of almost a case system, I would say. There's so high mathematics and then sort of low mathematics.
Yes.
No, this I think has largely dissipated. I think it's partly, especially among the younger generation, where the attitude is that you use whatever mathematics is available, and you don't turn your nose up at something because it's got too many of the wrong type of mathematics in it.
Right. The final question I want to ask, again, it comes from my experience responding to yours. I'm so struck by the fact that it's almost as though time doesn't exist in your field. Now, what I mean by that is it still seems like you're having conversations with colleagues who died 300 years ago. Yes.
Yeah. No, so this is a striking thing about mathematics. So I think all sciences have a transition point at some point in history where they become cumulative, where they build upon the works of the past. So, for example, physics, this started around the age of Galileo. So before Galileo, Aristotle would have some theory, but then it was wrong, and then sort of would have a different theory.
Exactly.
But Galileo's the scientific method. Okay, then it started becoming cumulative. Chemistry became cumulative once you had the periodic table and so forth. Biology once you had Darwin. But mathematics this process started with Euclid. Okay, so 3,000 years ago, as you said. And so, so I still use Pythagoras' theorem on a regular basis, often a very generalized version. But I still use the theorems of Euclid, again, in a very modern form. So this is a feature I really do like.
I was very struck coming to your office, the line of photographs of great mathematicians. There are very few departments I've been to where those earlier in the field are presented as colleagues. That's what it feels like.
Okay.
So
it's funny. People had mixed reactions to So we do have an array going back to like the 10th century at least, and some people find it intimidating. Yeah, okay, but okay, I can see that it can also be inspiring. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.